Retirement pension mistakes and how to avoid them. The first one is taking 25% cash-free lump sum immediately on retirement. Your pension has to last a long time, and this is one way to prevent that from happening. Remember the law of compounding. Your pension has to last you 30, 40 years. Now you could use this lump sum to pay off a mortgage, but maybe investing in a dividend hero could work instead if the dividend yield on that dividend hero is greater than the interest rate on your mortgage, so it's just a complete offset. The exception to this rule is that if you're already over the lifetime allowance, then it might be a potential thing to consider. Next mistake is recycling from your SIP into an ISA. You're moving money from one investment pot to another. So for example, you could take 80,000 into drawdown, get 20k tax-free cash, and then put that into an ISA. Again, this only works if you have lifetime allowance issues. Otherwise, you're reducing the value of the 25% tax-free part of your SIP. If the SIP is growing by more than inflation, then the value to you of this 25% tax-free is growing over time, and you want to take from the SIP as late as possible. Also, this is not helpful for inheritance tax. So the general rule is that you only take from your SIP if you actually intend to spend the money. Next mistake is using UF+ and not flexible access drawdown in your first years of retirement. With flexible access drawdown, the amount you can put into your pension stays at £40,000 and not the £4,000 if you actually touched your pension pot itself. So here we've got an example. You can pause the video and look through it yourself, but basically the person ends up being a lot better off using the flexible access drawdown rather than the UF+. Next potential mistake is ISA Millionaire. So with this, if you just save in an ISA, then you might not be fully utilising your personal allowance prior to the state pension kicking in. So you'll pay no tax, but you're not using the allowance either. So you could use this as a strategy if you already have things like property income or some kind of non-employment income that's already using your personal allowance anyway. Next potential mistake is a fat FIRE for SIP. So fat FIRE is really living the high life when you retire, but the problem is you'll be paying 40% marginal tax. So you'll have this really heavy tax burden, and then if you try and apply the 4% rule to what you're doing with your wealth in retirement, you'll probably find it doesn't work because nearly half of your money is going away in tax. Now you could pay a lot of income tax early to try and reduce the value of your pension and bring it in under the lifetime allowance for the age 75 test. But I don't really recommend this because we simply don't know how the lifetime allowance will change in the future. It could rise, it could fall. Next mistake with your pension is investing too conservatively. So bonds typically have lower returns than equities. Potentially they also have lower price volatility, but bonds are currently positively related with equities. That means that rising interest rates cause bond prices to fall at a time when equities are also weak, partly due to rising inflation, rising interest rates. So rather than helping with a portfolio, bonds are now dragging returns down, and if you wanted examples of this, just look at Vanguard Life Strategy. If you retire at 55, you've got maybe 35 or more years left to live. So you don't need your age in bonds or a 60-40 portfolio because you're only accessing 4% of your wealth each year. Next mistake is not considering downside risk. So a great investor that I know, Fund Hunter, his first rule of investing is, well, what could go wrong? So things like emerging markets or small cap can be very high risk. They can be out of favor for a very long period of time. You can get really frustrated and just sell them at a low price in anger. So quality, larger companies with a diversified product offering that is sold in a large number of countries with strong branding and intellectual property, that's the way to go. and you can diversify through funds, probably passive, but you could maybe look at a few active ones. The next mistake in retirement is comparing yourself to others. So not talking to anyone is potentially harmful, but other people say things like, I've beaten Warren Buffett's returns, when they had half of their portfolio in just one share, so it could have easily gone the other way, and they could be coming to you cap in hand saying, oh, just blew up my portfolio. Most people don't know how to calculate portfolio returns if they're adding to their portfolio each month. They often end up stating this as a capital gain, so they end up overstating their returns. So don't listen to other people. Next mistake, investing in individual stocks. What would you do if the company issues a profits warning and scraps its dividend? And here's an example with Direct Line, and you've got a huge decline in the price, and they said, well, we're going to suspend the dividend, so this lovely yield of 12.6% is just complete fiction. So people would probably sell in anger and frustration, and the problem is that this happens just too often, and it just becomes quite painful investing in retirement if you just stick with individual stocks. Next mistake is trying to live solely from income. So you could put together a 5% yield portfolio and just live on that. The problem is, well, what if the dividends don't grow with inflation? What if the dividends are cut or scrapped altogether? So many great dividend businesses have about a 2 to 3% current yield, but their dividends grow as their profits grow, as their revenues grow, as their share prices grow. If you just give these businesses time, you'll have a solid foundation and you'll have masses of income in retirement. So an example might be something like Vodafone, which is a very stodgy but high yielding company, although it has cut its dividend in the past, might do in the future. It's struggling under its debts, versus Procter & Gamble, which has grown really solidly, and the current yield always looks really low, but actually if you'd invested in Procter & Gamble 10 years ago, you'd now be getting healthy income on that original investment, and you'll have had capital growth as well. Next mistake is excessively worrying about running out of money. So instead of returning to work or downsizing your house, you need to lower your expenditure when the going gets tough, and this is called Guyton guardrails, and I've done a video on this, and you can stress test your portfolio against different stock market cycles. So the problem with downsizing your house is if you do that during a recession, you won't get much money for it, and the problem with returning to work is, again, if it's a tight labour market, you won't be able to get anything that remotely interests you. So the Guyton guardrails is the way to go. Next mistake is paying a 1% fee to a financial advisor. In this example, we've got a £1 million portfolio split 50% SIP, 50% ISA. We're taking 42k from it after tax, and we're getting 6% returns on the money. And the portfolio, yeah, it looks absolutely fine. Don't think this person has anything to worry about. So now what we do is we change those 6% returns down to 5% because we're paying 1% fee to the advisor. And this is what happens to the portfolio. They go bust at the age of about 88. So the whole wealth has just collapsed because they're just paying so much money to the advisor, and this is compounding over time and just dragging their returns down. So as advisors can't guarantee to beat the market, I would avoid them. Final idea is having no plan at all. That's to be avoided. When you're growing your wealth, you just save as much as you possibly can in a global tracker with a mix between your pension and your ISA, as is appropriate for your needs and when you want to retire. But in retirement, things are much more difficult. There aren't really many books that tackle this properly, and in the decumulation phase there's lots of tax traps which I've highlighted in this video that you can fall into. My advice, surprise surprise, is to get a coach like myself to bounce ideas off. That could be really beneficial, and I can help you model your wealth. So if you're interested, contact me, ianshadrack@gmail.com. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I hope you enjoyed the video. Give it a like. Let me know your comments. See you next week.